Good morning. Thanks everyone for joining. We'll give a couple more minutes for people to log in.
Buenos días y gracias por acompañarnos. Vamos a dar un par de minutos para que puedan ingresar más personas.
Okay, good morning. I'm Dana Papke-Waters with the California Air Resources Board. I'm our regulatory lead staff developing zero-emission space and water heater standards. I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us today and let you all know that this workshop will be recorded. And before I move on, I'd like to introduce today's Spanish interpreters, Carlos and Grizel.
Buenos días, Grisel ya nos acompaña en el canal de interpretación. A su servidor Carlos Díaz de León y Dana Waters les da la bienvenida a este primer taller de estándares de cero emisiones para calefactores y calentadores de agua.
Thank you, Carlos and Grizel, for providing interpretation services for today's workshop. For all workshop attendees, you have the option to view either the English version or the Spanish version of the slides. At the top of the Zoom webinar window, you can select either diapositivas on Espanol or English slides. And if you have any technical difficulties, please email us at buildingdecarb@arb.ca.gov.
Thank you for joining. Perdón, gracias por acompañarse de hoy. Pueden ver la versión en español de las diapositivas. En la parte superior podrán seleccionar ya sea diapositivas en español o English Slides. Y si tienen alguna dificultad técnica para hacerlo, envíe un correo electrónico a buildingthecarb, como ve en pantalla, @rb.ca.gov. Thank you.
Thank you. Now let me walk through how to access the Spanish channel on the webinar. In your Zoom webinar controls, you can click on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen to access the interpretation. You can select your preferred language. If you are listening in English, please select English. This will allow you to hear any comments that are given in Spanish and interpreted to English. If you would only like to hear the Spanish channel, you can select mute original audio. And again, if you have any technical difficulties, please email us at the address on the slide. Okay, great. Next slide. Okay, I just wanted to say good morning and welcome again. Thanks for joining us today. We are really glad you're here, whether you're joining us for the first time or you've joined our workshops or other events in the past. We really appreciate your time and interest. Our main goal for today is to really solicit input on a revised regulatory proposal and share updates on our public engagement and technical analysis, after which we'll have time for public comments. Just to reiterate, this workshop is being recorded. The slides are available on our website, and a recording of the workshop will be posted soon. So really the main motivation for this regulation is to reduce climate pollutants, improve air quality, and protect public health. Direct emissions from space and water heating equipment account for about 10% of California's greenhouse gas emissions, and also about 5% of smog-forming NOx emissions, which are linked to asthma, heart disease, and other serious health issues. So setting emission standards for space and water heaters is really a key strategy for achieving California's carbon neutrality targets that are outlined in our 2022 scoping plan. These standards are also a measure of California's 2022 state strategy for the state implementation plan, which is also known as the state SIP strategy, to meet our federal ozone requirements under the Clean Air Act. So here's a look at our process so far. Since the adoption of the 2022 state SIP strategy and the scoping plan, our team has really been actively engaging with the public and interested parties. We've had 3 public workshops, 11 listening sessions across California, as well as 10 technical feedback meetings with public experts. We've also engaged with CARB's Assembly Bill 32 Environmental Justice Advisory Committee, whose recommendations help inform the design of our revised regulatory proposal with the goal for it to be implemented equitably. This last October, we published an outreach and engagement update, which summarizes all of the public engagement learnings that we've heard so far and related actions that CARB staff and other public agencies are taking. So the original regulatory concept would have required 100% of new space and water heaters sold in California to meet zero greenhouse gas targets starting in 2030. In May of 2024, we shared a revised concept that had different dates starting in 2027 and ending in 2033 that were based on equipment type and size, but it was still focused on 100% zero emission sales. In response to all of the feedback that we gathered through the public workshops, through the listening sessions, and various meetings, our team has developed a revised regulatory proposal that includes emissive sales limits combined with a credit system to really provide flexibility to address regulated entity as well as end user challenges. And when we're talking about emissive equipment, it's really any space and water heater that releases greenhouse gas emissions during on-site operation. And throughout the presentation today, our team is going to use the term space and water heaters. And when we say water heaters, that includes pool and spa heaters as well. So today, we'll walk through this revised proposal and really invite your feedback to ensure that it's practical, equitable, and effective. Okay, so here are the 5 topics that we'll cover during today's workshop. First, we'll begin with the revised regulatory proposal. Then we'll summarize all of the public engagement feedback that we've received so far and provide an update on our staff analysis work, which really informed the development of our revised regulatory proposal. And finally, we'll close with overall public comments and next steps. I did want to point out that there is a Q&A feature in Zoom that allows attendees to submit questions. We have a chat feature that's disabled to help us keep the focus on the presentation. And during the public comment portion, you'll have an opportunity to unmute and speak directly to share your thoughts or ask questions. And we really do encourage that. And if, depending upon how many people are participating, we may limit public comments to 2 or 3 minutes per speaker. Okay, so our revised regulatory proposal sets limits on the percentage of new space and water heaters sold in California that release greenhouse gases during on-site operation. Sales of new space and water heaters must not exceed these emissive equipment sales limits. We have identified several technologies, including electric resistance, heat pump, solar thermal, and hydrogen fuel cells that would qualify as zero emission equipment and would not meet or be considered emissive equipment. The revised regulatory proposal introduces a flexible compliance pathway through a credit system, which will allow manufacturers to earn bank and trade credits to comply with the regulation. The revised proposal is really designed to reduce emissions while still offering flexibility to regulated entities and really address end user challenges. And similar to previous regulatory concepts that we've presented in the past, this one would not restrict the use or repair of any existing space or water heaters. So previous regulatory concepts focused on 100% zero emission sales requirement, and through the public engagement process, we heard that 100% sales target is really not feasible for all consumers, given end user challenges such as costs and building constraints. For example, we heard that some buildings may need costly and time-intensive retrofits to upsize electrical panels, or reconfigure space to install zero emission space and water heaters. And also, when equipment fails unexpectedly, we heard that there may be limited equipment availability and lack of time for major retrofits, as well as some building types, such as mobile and manufactured homes or multifamily housing, also may face unique challenges with limited space. So we did conduct a building retrofit assessment as well as an equity analysis that evaluated some of these challenges, and helped really to inform the development of the emissive sales limits that we're talking about today. You'll hear more about those supporting analyses after we share an overview of the revised proposal. And basically, we think that the revised regulatory proposal really introduces these gradual achievable limits on emissive equipment sales. And by decreasing the volume of emissive equipment sales, it also helps to achieve a meaningful emission reduction to help achieve California's climate and air quality targets. Okay, so our earlier regulatory concepts really did not give manufacturers any flexibility to meet the rules. We didn't incorporate exemptions in this latest proposal because it would be administratively too difficult to apply them across the whole state. And while exemptions may help in some situations, we heard a broad request from the public to not exempt communities that are facing barriers. We also heard from interested parties to explore alternative regulatory frameworks such as credit or market-based programs. So our revised regulatory proposal does include a credit-based system that really tries to encourage technology innovation and donations to incentive programs to address equity and end user challenges. It also offers multiple compliance pathways to address manufacturer and supply chain constraints. So the credit system really is focused on achieving market-wide emission reductions so that even if some manufacturers comply using credits, the overall statewide emissive sales limits would be met. Okay, so here's a look at the proposed emissive limits. So beginning in 2030, equipment with a rated heat input capacity up to 2 million British thermal units or BTUs per hour must comply with the emissive sales limits. Starting in 2030, the emissive sales would be limited to a maximum of 40% for space heaters, 60% for water heaters, and 60% for pool heaters. And by 2040, these emissive limits would tighten to 25% for space heaters, 50% for water heaters, and about 40% for pool heaters. The equation at the top basically explains that manufacturer sales of emissive equipment would need to be less than or equal to their total equipment sales multiplied by the emissive sales limit for any given year. And we are defining sales in this case as any equipment that's produced and delivered for sale or sold in California. This chart shows the emissive baseline sales for space, water, and pool heating in the absence of any kind of a revised regulatory proposal. So without this type of regulation, we expect that statewide in 2030, about half of space heaters that are shown in blue, 70% of water heaters that are shown in orange, and about 62% of pool and spa heaters shown in green would be emissive technologies. These estimates reflect the impact of existing rules and regulations that are really expected to drive down emissive equipment sales over time, including the 2025 Energy Code, as well as the Zero NOx Bay Area District Rules 9.4 and 9.6, and the South Coast Rule 1146.2. Emissive sales in this baseline are expected to decrease gradually over time as the share of newly constructed buildings that are more likely to install zero emission heating make up a larger share of the total building stock. Really you can see here a notable drop between 2030 and 2031 in the emissive pool and spa heater sales is expected when South Coast Rule 1146.2 goes into effect for that equipment. Okay, this slide shows the same chart with the baseline emissive sales in dashed lines, and for comparison, it shows the proposed sales limits in solid lines. In the solid blue line, the emissive sales for space heating would decrease from 40% in 2030 to about 25% in 2040. In the solid orange line, the emissive sales limit for water heating would decrease from 60% in 2030 to 50% in 2040. And in the solid green line, you can see the emissive sales limit for pool and spa heating would decrease from 60% in 2030 to 40% in 2031 and then remain constant through 2040. These emissive limits are much more modest than the previous 100% zero emission sales requirement. And our team developed these limits that were informed by our public engagement work as well as our technical staff analysis. With our building retrofit analysis, we estimated the percentage of buildings that may experience extensive retrofits, and that helped to provide a check on these percentages in this revised regulatory proposal. Our equity analysis also examined how retrofit needs would vary based on income, building type, and building tenure. So this helped us to consider emissive sales limits that would still allow for emissive sales for the most challenged buildings and resource-constrained households and businesses to still have access to emissive equipment when it's needed. Our technical analysis also confirmed what we heard during the listening sessions, really that different regions experience different challenges and targeted exemptions are difficult to enforce and can limit the benefits of the regulation for communities who face barriers. So instead of targeted exemptions, our team is proposing less aggressive emissive sales limits statewide. During the public engagement or during the public comment portion of the agenda, I should say, we'll be really asking for feedback on these proposed gradually decreasing emissive equipment sales limits. So we'll look forward to your feedback on these draft limits at that time. Okay, so we did develop two alternative regulatory concepts that vary from the proposal. Alternative one is less stringent and allows 5% more emissive sales each year for space and water heating compared to the proposal. Alternative two is more stringent and reduces the emissive sales percentage by about 10 to 15% for space and water heating and about 10% for pool heating compared to the proposal. Similar to the emissive limits, we're seeking feedback on these and other potential alternative concepts. Our team will also present the emissions and cost estimates for the proposal as well as the alternatives later this morning. Okay, so as I mentioned, to provide flexibility, the regulatory proposal includes a credit system. This would allow manufacturers to earn bank and trade credits. Credits can be earned through CARB-approved actions, which will be covered in more detail shortly. But generally, manufacturers would earn one credit for each piece of zero-emission equipment produced and delivered for sale or sold in California that reduces their emissive sales below the limit. We're also proposing credits that are greater than one for larger capacity and innovative zero-emission equipment, as well as zero-emission equipment that's donated to incentive programs and other actions that we'll cover shortly. If manufacturers sell more emissive units than they're allowed to sell based on CARB's proposed emissive sales limit, the credit system really allows manufacturers to earn or trade credits to comply with the regulation. And any deficits incurred would need to be remedied within 3 calendar years. We also have an option for credit banking, which allows manufacturers to bank credits generated in any calendar year to use for a future calendar year until the credit sunsets. We also have an opportunity for credit trading, which allows manufacturers to buy, sell, or trade credits from other manufacturers. Okay, so here's an example for determining credits below the limit, as well as credit deficits, based on two kind of generic manufacturer sales portfolios. In the first example, a manufacturer has a 50-50 split of emissive and zero emission equipment sales. In the second example, it demonstrates the credits earned for a manufacturer with 100% zero emission sales. In the first example, this manufacturer would incur a credit deficit for the amount of emissive equipment sales that exceeded the emissive limit. And if they generate this credit deficit in the year 2030, they'd have until the year 2033 to make up the deficit. Okay, so this slide shows a mock-up of how credit trading could work under the credit program. As we've discussed, manufacturers would be required to meet the annual limit, which is shown in a red dash bar across the chart. If a manufacturer sells fewer emissive units than the annual limit, they'll earn credits, which is that first bottom left-hand corner credit earning demonstration. Additional credits can be earned by selling innovative zero emission equipment or donating to eligible incentive programs, as well as other actions that we'll talk about in the next few slides. Any credits earned, as this shows, can be banked to be used for future years. And any kind of non-compliance with the regulation would result in penalties. But this shows just kind of a mock-up of how the credit trading system would work. Now that I've shared kind of the overview of the proposed emission limits and some of the basics of the credit system, I'd like to introduce my colleague Alway to share more details on our latest thinking related to potential credit earning actions. So thank you.
Thanks, Dana. In the next few slides, we will share different credit earning actions we're considering organized by their primary purpose. The first type of credit earning actions are focused on emission reductions. We want manufacturers to actively work towards reducing emissions, so we are considering offering credits for the following two actions. First is early compliance. Manufacturers that meet their 2030 emissive limits ahead of schedule by submitting compliance reports for 2028 and 2029 can earn credits. These credits will sunset in 2035, meaning that manufacturers won't be able to use, bank, or trade these credits after that year. Second is for emissive sales below their annual limit. Each year that a manufacturer sells emissive units below their limit, they'll earn credits equal to the difference between their emissive equipment sales limit and their actual emissive sales. The next type of potential credit earning actions are focused on addressing specific end user issues through technology innovation and improving equipment accessibility in low-income communities. Through our public engagement and research, we identified several end user issues that could be addressed with the right technology, so we are considering offering up to 2.5 credits for units equipped with the following innovative features. These features include cold climate certified heat pumps to support those who live in the state's coldest climates, low power units such as 120 volt heat pump water heaters, which reduce the building retrofit costs by potentially bypassing the need to upsize electrical panels, equipment with integrated battery storage that provide added resiliency in the case of power outages, and large capacity equipment to help decarbonize large buildings. Another key issue has been reducing upfront costs in priority communities. Incentive programs do a great job filling that gap, so we propose to offer credits to manufacturers who donate or discount zero-emission equipment to qualifying incentive programs. To maintain program integrity and a healthy credit market, we're considering credit caps and sunset dates for certain actions. And we gladly welcome your feedback on how best to design and manage these credits. Finally, CARB is considering credits for actions that go beyond current refrigerant requirements, aiming to reduce the climate impacts of refrigerants. We heard the public request to include refrigerants in our regulation. Senate Bill 1206 reduces the global warming potential, or GWP, of newly produced bulk HFCs or bulk HFC blends sold into the state between 2025 and 2033 and beyond, with a 1500 GWP requirement beginning in 2030 and a 750 GWP requirement beginning in 2033. SB 1206 also asks CARB to assess how to transition the state's economy away from HFCs to ultra-low GWP alternatives, defined as having GWP values of less than 10 by 2035. Additionally, California also has existing rules that prohibit HFCs with a GWP of 750 or greater in space conditioning heat pumps. So, we are considering offering credits to manufacturers for two different actions: using refrigerants with ultra-low GWPs of less than 10 in their equipment, or for using reclaimed refrigerants in new equipment. We propose that the credit values for these scale depending on the refrigerant charge size. Switching gears now to reporting and record keeping. Accurate accounting of equipment sales in California is essential for program transparency and compliance. The reporting and record-keeping provisions would apply to two groups of regulated entities. First are manufacturers who produce and deliver for sale equipment into California, and second are distributors, defined as any entity purchasing equipment for resale to consumers. Reporting would have two stages. First, an initial report, which serves to register your entity with CARB so that we can engage effectively. This would also include an initial equipment sales portfolio. I'll discuss more in detail on the next slide. The second stage of reporting requirements would be annual reports that will allow CARB to account for all equipment sales, purchases, and credits to determine regulated entity compliance. These would be due starting in 2030. To receive any credits with pre-2030 information, early reporting for 2028 and 2029 would be required to earn credits. Finally, regulated entities would be required to keep all sales and purchase records for at least 5 years after submitting their annual report and to make them available upon request to ensure accuracy. We'll now dig a bit more into the reporting requirements specifically. As stated, there would be an initial report due on July 31st, 2029, and regulated entities would submit contact information and initial equipment sales and purchases by equipment type and size for the 2028 calendar year. CARB would provide reporting templates for regulated entities to submit reports to simplify the submission process and reduce confusion. With the annual report starting in 2030, manufacturers would be required to report on their equipment sales volume into California by equipment type, model family, size, name of purchaser, their business ID, and estimated credits, either earned, banked, or sold, and the year that they were earned. Distributors would be required to report on their equipment purchase volume by equipment type, model family, size, the manufacturer or brand, and the name and business ID of whom it was purchased from. The purpose of these details are to ensure accuracy and transparency between the regulated entities and CARB. Finally, with the California Energy Commission developing an energy data collection rule, CARB will try to align our final reporting requirements to the extent possible to minimize administrative burden on regulated entities. Now I'll pass it over to Maggie C., who will walk us through the summary of feedback we received through our public engagement.
Thanks so much, Awe. So 2024 was a very busy and productive year for our public engagement work. We hosted 2 public workshops, held technical feedback meetings, and received written feedback on early drafts of our staff analysis. We also hosted 5 public expert briefings on topics like tenant protections and building retrofits, and conducted 11 listening sessions, 4 virtual and 7 in various locations across the state. 8 of the listening sessions were co-hosted by organizations who had applied through our public expert solicitation. And all were supported by our partner in this work, the Sacramento State Consensus and Collaboration Program. This slide shows a map of all the different listening sessions we held around the state. At that time, staff were still considering a 100% zero emission sales target. So that concept served as the starting point for the discussions at each of our listening sessions. Each event was unique. We heard from folks living off-grid near Grass Valley, California, and toured an affordable housing project in downtown San Francisco. Despite the diversity of participants and locations, there were common themes that emerged, and I will summarize those in the next few slides. After the listening sessions, CARB staff, together with Sac State, documented and reflected on what we had heard and published the Outreach and Engagement Update Report, which provides a much more detailed update on all of our public engagement activities than what I'll be able to share with you today. The report not only includes detailed summaries from each listening session, but it also summarizes the key themes we heard from the public and then shares the actions that CARB staff and other agency staff are taking within that context. So we'll share a link to this document in the chat. Thanks, Kathy. Throughout our public engagement, we heard a lot about end user challenges. Common themes we heard included concerns about housing affordability, high installation costs, and limited incentives. We also heard about high energy costs, the challenges associated with building conditions and electrical panel capacity. The public shared challenges unique to rural and off-grid communities, including cold weather, electrical grid reliability, and access to contractors and workforce. And we heard requests to allow for dual fuel systems, and then requests for tenant protections, particularly related to increased rent, rent evictions, and evictions tied to building upgrades. Within the context of these end user challenges, people gave us suggestions on how to revise our regulation concept to help mitigate the concerns that they raised. We heard requests for exemptions and flexibility and requests to explore credit programs. People told us that the compliance timelines were too aggressive and may need to be adjusted. Suggestions also were tied to concerns about refrigerant leakage and recovery, warranty, and labor provisions. We also heard a suggestion to require labels and stickers on heating equipment. Regarding implementation of the standards, we heard people stress the importance of a prepared workforce, a need for coordination with other public agencies, and the importance of outreach and education. And now I will turn it over to my colleague, Emma Tomei.
Thank you, Maggie. So as we've heard, public engagement was really essential in shaping how our concept evolved. And I want to give special thanks to all the public experts who co-hosted listening sessions, provided feedback on our methods, and gave briefings. I think I see a couple of you all on the attendee list, and it made a big difference in helping us think through our concepts. Feedback from the Environmental Justice Advisory Committee, and especially Martha Dina Arguello and Kevin Hamilton, and through their written resolution, is also guiding the revised concept we're sharing with you today. And we appreciate the opportunities from the California Heat Pump Partnership, where we've had productive dialogue with member manufacturers and other state agencies around achieving the state's 6 million heat pump by 2030 goal, which we think will build helpful momentum towards achieving our regulatory goals. So as Dana and Awe have shared, our new proposal shifts away from fixed dates after which only zero-emission equipment could be sold. Instead, it introduces gradually decreasing limits on emissive equipment sales. This focuses on reducing statewide emissions while leaving sufficient flexibility for challenging cases. Our original concepts never intended to regulate at the end user level as permit requirements already do, and that remains true with this revised proposal. And finally, the revised proposal introduces compliance flexibility options for manufacturers, which is aimed toward facilitating successful implementation. We've designed credit categories to support actions to ease consumer cost and technical barriers, and we're excited to refine these ideas with your further feedback. Above and beyond the regulation itself, We recognize implementation planning is an essential element of regulatory success. That means strengthening and making more visible our ongoing coordination work with other state agencies to track progress around complementary policies and programs. Looking ahead, in addition to the workshops we'll hold to continue refining the regulatory ideas shared today, we'll work with partner agencies to define a scope for a strategic implementation plan draft that will accompany our proposal to the board. We recognize that thinking about the intersections with energy rates, incentives, building codes and standards, and supportive activities can't wait for after a rule is approved. Outlining a shared path among state policies is part of showing how CARB's planned standards are an achievable next step toward achieving the state's climate goals. In parallel, we're also developing public-facing fact sheets to help dispel myths and misconceptions and provide clear and accurate information about the benefits of zero-emission heating, electricity supply and reliability, and building retrofits. Now I'll hand it over to my colleague Sam Lerman, who will walk us through the first part of the staff analysis update.
Great, thank you, Emma. Our technical analysis consists of 5 main areas, all guided by a strong emphasis on equity and environmental justice. The technology assessment evaluates different available technologies, key considerations, and typical applications. The emissions modeling estimates the greenhouse gas and criteria pollutant emissions from the regulatory proposal and alternatives, which are used in determining associated public health benefits. The building retrofits assessment characterizes existing building conditions and identifies where retrofits may be needed to accommodate zero-emission technologies. Our cost analysis assesses impacts on households and businesses, along with a macroeconomic analysis to estimate how the regulation could affect California's overall economy. And finally, our equity analysis identifies vulnerable populations and disparities across different groups. In the next few slides, we will be discussing key highlights from each of these areas and how they informed our overall regulatory approach. This slide highlights some examples of current zero-emission space heater technologies. Electric resistant space heaters include electric furnaces and large commercial boilers that can provide both space and water heating. These technologies are widely available. However, they have high operating costs and are generally discouraged in the California Energy Code. Multiple types of space heating heat pumps are available today, including package and central split systems, ductless mini splits, which can ease retrofit burdens for homes that don't currently have ducted systems, and variable refrigerant flow systems for large commercial buildings. Some considerations for heat pumps include low operating costs, high capital costs, and roof area limitations for package systems. Space heating heat pumps may experience efficiency losses in cold climates. However, technology advancements have allowed several manufacturers to begin offering products that meet Energy Cold Star climate certifications, which certifies that the equipment can operate efficiently when outdoor temperatures are as low as 5 degrees Fahrenheit. Heat recovery chillers are another available technology for heating large commercial buildings and have low operating costs, but require significant simultaneous heating and cooling loads to be effective, which can limit their applicability in many cases. Hydrogen fuel cells are not currently available in the U.S. and require sufficient hydrogen fuel availability for their operation. This slide describes some examples of zero-emission water heater technologies, which are also applicable to pool heating. Electric resistance water heaters are available and serve a wide variety of residential and commercial building types, but typically have high operating costs and slow heating times, and federal rules will restrict production and importing of many common electric resistance storage tank sizes in the United States beginning in 2029. Heat pump water heaters are also commercially ready and widely available. The emergence of 120-volt products can serve as a solution to reducing panel capacity concerns for retrofit applications, and the development of central heat pump water heaters are expected to increase uptake of heat pumps in large commercial buildings. Split system heat pump water heaters are also emerging as a solution for space-constrained applications. Heat pumps tend to have high capital costs, but low operating costs, and capital costs are expected to decrease for these technologies as adoption rates increase. Heat pump water heaters also require larger storage tanks than traditional units and may need condensation removal and ventilation. Solar thermal water heaters are commercially available as well, but have limited deployment, limited site feasibility, and high maintenance requirements. And finally, hydrogen fuel cell water heaters are also not currently available in the US and require sufficient hydrogen fuel availability for their operation. CARB's emission modeling serves as a central hub for calculating emission and health benefits and cost impacts. The model incorporates building stock, energy demand, and equipment turnover assumptions from the California Energy Commission's Integrated Energy Policy Report forecast to estimate emission reductions and share of residential and commercial buildings that are impacted by the proposed measure and alternatives. The model applies assumptions around buildings needing panel or physical space upgrades to determine the share of buildings needing retrofits to accommodate zero-emission technologies. Outputs include changes in energy demand, number of zero-emission units purchased, and counts of building retrofits needed. These outputs feed into CARB's cost model to estimate upfront costs, energy bill impacts, and retrofit costs. Changes in energy demand are used to calculate emission benefits for both greenhouse gases and criteria pollutants, including NOx and particulate matter less than 2.5 microns, or PM2.5. NOx and PM2.5 estimates are then used to calculate associated health benefits. And the next 3 slides walk through the emissions and health benefit results for the revised proposal. This slide shows the greenhouse gas emission reductions from the current proposal and 2 alternatives, covering the period between 2030 and 2045. The regulatory proposal, represented by the orange line, has cumulative GHG reductions of 39 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents. Alternative 1, shown in the green line, has fewer cumulative reductions with 27 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents, while Alternative 2 achieves the highest cumulative reductions with 69 million metric tons carbon dioxide equivalents. This slide presents the NOx and PM2.5 emission reductions under the proposal and the 2 alternatives. Results are shown in annual tons reduced per day between 2030 and 2045. The proposal, represented by the orange line, has cumulative NOx reductions of 23,000 tons between 2030 and 2045, and cumulative PM2.5 reductions of 3,100 tons. Similar to GHGs, NOx and PM2.5 reductions for Alternative 1 are fewer than the proposal, while Alternative 2 achieves greater reductions for both pollutants. This slide highlights the estimated health impacts from the current proposal between 2030 and 2045. All numbers represent the number of cases avoided for each of the health endpoints analyzed. Health impact numbers are based on the NOx and PM2.5 reduction estimates by air basin. The health benefits analyzed cover 12 health endpoints, including cardiovascular, respiratory, and neurological health outcomes, especially for those that affect our most vulnerable populations, children and seniors. Key results include 636 avoided premature cardiopulmonary deaths, 151 avoided hospitalizations for cardiovascular and respiratory illness, and 526 avoided emergency department visits for cardiovascular and respiratory-related illnesses. I'll now pass it over to Allison to discuss our building retrofit analysis.
Great, thanks, Sam. So in our retrofit analysis, we estimated how many buildings across California may need retrofits when replacing emissive equipment with zero-emission alternatives at the end of their useful life. Using California building data from ResStock and Comstock, we focused on 2 key retrofit triggers for space and water heating. The first is electrical panel and service capacity, and the second is physical space and ventilation needs for zero-emission equipment. After our initial analysis, we consulted public experts, technical experts, and public agency staff. And then based on their feedback, we updated our approach. So some of the key changes that we've made include refining panel capacity estimates for mobile and manufactured homes, revising assumed technology replacement rates, and improving water heater retrofit estimates using new ResStock data on current water heater installation locations. This slide provides more detail on how we conducted the retrofit analysis. We began by reviewing literature, attending presentations and site visits, and gathering feedback. The goal here was to identify suitable replacement equipment for different building types, understand the range of retrofits needed, and address data gaps in the ResStock and Comstock data sets. After that, we estimated retrofit actions based on existing and replacement equipment types, equipment size, quantity, and location, and building characteristics such as building type, energy use, climate, and available space in and around the building. Some examples of these retrofits include relocating equipment, adding ventilation, and adding roof reinforcement to support larger or heavier equipment. And then finally, we estimated costs and categorized retrofit actions into 4 different levels. So those are no retrofit, basic, moderate, and extensive. These results then fed into other staff analysis, such as our emissions modeling, statewide cost analysis, and our equity analysis. And now I'll present the high-level results from this analysis. So the results are grouped by residential and non-residential buildings across those 4 retrofit levels. For electrical capacity retrofits, we estimate that 13% of residential units and 32% of non-residential floor area have both zero-emission space heaters and water heaters already installed or have equipment not covered in our proposal. 32% of residential and 23% of non-residential buildings have adequate panel capacity and only need a basic retrofit to add a new circuit. About 40% of residential and non-residential buildings may need panel optimization. This may include adding smart circuit breakers, smart panels, or load sharing devices. And then extensive panel retrofits to upsize the electrical panel or service may be needed for about 14% of residential and 6% of non-residential buildings. This slide shows the physical space retrofit results for space heating. On the residential side, 27% of housing units already have a zero-emission space heater, and there are a wide range of zero-emission space heating technologies available for different building conditions. For example, homes with central air conditioning can use packaged or split heat pumps. Homes without ducts may opt for ductless systems like mini splits or packaged terminal heat pumps. And larger multifamily buildings can choose centralized solutions such as variable refrigerant flow systems or in-unit ductless equipment. So given this diversity, we assumed that all residential units could accommodate at least one zero-emission option appropriate for their specific building conditions without additional physical space retrofits. However, residential building owners could choose to retrofit their home to accommodate their desired space heating technology. For non-residential, about 53% have equipment that is zero emission or not covered in the proposal. 15% by floor area may need basic retrofits to install zero-emission space heaters in the same location as existing air conditioning units. About 31% may need moderate retrofits to accommodate larger replacement equipment. and less than 1% may require extensive modifications, such as a roof reconfiguration or repurposing interior space. Here we have the physical space retrofit results for water heating. For residential buildings with an in-unit water heater, 18% already use zero-emission equipment, and half need only a basic retrofit. About a quarter may require moderate retrofits, such as relocating the water heater to the garage or adding ventilation, and an estimated 7% may need extensive work to relocate the water heater elsewhere. For residential buildings with central water heaters, about 1/3 need no retrofit. Another third require basic wiring upgrades. About 16% may need a moderate retrofit to add ducted ventilation or install the replacement water heater outdoors. And another 16% may need extensive work to expand the mechanical room, add water storage tanks, and or relocate equipment and piping. Nearly half of non-residential buildings are already zero emission or have equipment not covered in the proposal. Of the remainder, about a quarter will need basic retrofits. Another quarter, we estimate, will need moderate retrofits, and about 1% may require extensive retrofits similar to those described for the residential buildings with central water heaters. Okay, and now I will pass it back to Emma to describe our team's equity analysis.
Thanks, Allison. So our team acknowledges the critical importance of equity and affordability considerations in designing a feasible regulation. So while a typical regulatory analysis will report on household impacts on average, we recognize that household needs and resources differ widely across the state.
How did you know?
I'm hearing some background noise. If folks could make sure they're muted, thank you. So household resource and needs will differ widely across the state. For example, 2 in 10 Californian households today report finding it very difficult or nearly impossible to pay for a $1,000 emergency expense. And that share jumps to nearly half for Californians who make under $40,000 a year. So we need to design our regulatory targets in a way that does not require low resource, high retrofit need households to transition to zero emission equipment if it's not possible for them. At the same time, income or geography-based blanket exemptions would also risk excluding those same households from the pollution reduction benefits of a regulation. So our core design principle is that our overall emission reduction targets should leave some flexibility, serve to guide the market as a whole, while incentive and other supportive programs help address retrofit needs and lower costs to consumers. So for this reason, wherever possible, we wish to connect the manufacturer level flexibility approaches to existing equity programs with the intent of making zero emission options more affordable and accessible to more Californians. We also encourage technology innovations that can reduce or eliminate the need for retrofits to accommodate zero emission equipment where emissive equipment was previously installed. So as a check of the feasibility of our targets, we examined how retrofit needs are distributed across different income levels in the state. And our broader environmental justice and equity analysis will present similar results on retrofit needs across all end uses and by owner and renter status. The analysis shown here combine the need for electrical capacity and physical space retrofits for water heating. Households are grouped by income deciles based on representative household income data from Redstock and organized from the lowest representative incomes on the left-hand side of the x-axis to the highest on the right. We can see a clear trend where lower income households face higher retrofit needs, as shown in red. These households also have a greater instance of already having zero emission heating at a rate higher than high income households. Lower income households are also more likely to rent and live in multifamily buildings, So while they may not directly face retrofit costs, adopting zero-emission technologies may be more complex due to landlord and tenant split incentives and decision-making and rent increase concerns. So the emissive equipment sales limits of the proposal can be met with the lowest income households continuing to make like-for-like replacements if going to zero emission is not feasible. Manufacturers can stay under emissive sales limits by selling zero-emission equipment replacements to those already using it and encouraging higher resource households to move from emissive to zero-emission technologies when their existing equipment burns out. Incentives, whole home retrofits, and other supportive programs will remain critical for addressing the needs of lower resource households. And as the regulation is implemented, we would examine equity impacts and progress over time based on updated survey data from residential appliance saturation and energy consumption surveys that underlie data like ResStock. This analysis can also help us identify program gaps and potential strategies to focus state resources to support equitable decarbonization. Now, Chi-Chung Tsao will discuss our cost analysis.
Thank you, Emma. As my colleagues mentioned earlier, our teams worked very closely together, and each topic's areas contribute important pieces to the overall cost analysis. For example, we use the technology information and the adoption scenario from the technology assessments. Energy use results from the emission modeling team, and the retrofit needs and the cost from the building retrofit assessment. Our cost analysis looks at the full pictures of how the proposed regulations may affect households, business, manufacturers, and the distributors. This including equipment and the installation cost, building retrofit cost, operating cost, and administrative costs needed for compliance. We also account for taxes, fees, and the regional difference in labor costs, as well as inflations. So to keep the analysis grounded in real-world conditions, we use the latest available public data, such as the current utility rates, future energy price forecasts from the California Energy Commissions, market price for equipment, and the detailed assessment of building retrofit actions. All of these inputs were brought together in our cost models to estimate the incremental cost impact on household and business. We are also evaluating broader economic effects, such as a potential change in employment, personal income, investments, and state overall economic activities. These broader impacts help us understand the regulations' effects at the statewide level. Next slide. Okay. So to make sure our approach reflects the real conditions and the community experiences, we also consulted with several public and technical experts. Their feedback was extremely helpful, especially as the market for heating equipment continues to evolve quickly. Here are some of the key takeaways. So first, experts share the additional data sources on equipment cost, and we incorporate most of this into our database to help check and refine our model results. They also suggest treating air conditioner as a part of the baseline equipment, since heat pumps can provide both heating and cooling. However, not every California household has an air conditioner, and the AC units and the heaters often have a different useful lifespans. To balance these factors, experts recommend applying a 50% cost adjustments for homes that already have an AC, reflecting the probability that both the AC and the heaters might be replaced at the same time. We also heard concerns about the recent volatilities in energy prices. In response, we continued updating our analysis with the latest utility rates information and used the most recent energy price forecasts from the CEC 2025's Integrated Energy Policy Report, which is the IPER. Finally, experts highlight the uncertainties around the future equipment and the installation costs. These can be affected by material prices, supply chains, tariffs, and many other factors. At the same time, costs can also decrease as the technology improves and the more units are produced. Because the future prices are so uncertain, so we choose to keep them fixed at their 2024 levels in our analysis. So here, we would like to share our preliminary results to total incremental cost to households and the business under the proposed regulation. So we combined all the cost inputs and then calculate the incremental cost differences between today's baseline equipment and the zero emissions alternatives to better reflect how people actually pay for equipment. We amortize the upfront cost over the useful life of the equipment using a 5% discount rate. This allows for fair comparisons of the long-term cost. So this chart shows the major components of the total cost: equipment, retrofit, maintenance, and energy, along with the total incremental cost under the main scenario shown in the solid red line. The dotted and the dashed red line shows two alternative scenarios. So early on, we expect costs to rise because zero-emission technology generally have a higher upfront equipment installations and the retrofit cost. But over time, however, these added costs are partly offset by lower energy bills. Many households and the business would see energy saving grow over time, which helps level out the total long-term cost. As the chart shows, energy bill savings are a major source of the benefits. However, this savings depends heavily on future energy prices, which vary depending on several factors, and I will walk through that next. So, among all types of energy, the future price of the natural gas is especially uncertain because it depends on domestic policies, global market, and how quickly gas demand changes. So in our analysis, we use the latest gas price forecast from the CEC 2025 IPERS, Integrated Energy Policy Report. The forecast includes more than 10 scenarios based on different demand levels and the utility revenue needs. So this slide shows the price trend for three major demand scenarios. In the preliminary modeling results shown here, we illustrate the most conservative scenario, the baseline cases, which is the base demand front-load revenue requirement scenario, which assuming that the highest future gas demand. Using this conservative scenario, the proposed regulation resulted in a net overall cost for end-use consumers. Next slide. The forecast also included two variations of the baseline demand case based on different utility revenue requirements, one assuming constant growth and the other assuming cost reductions, which is pronging. We ran a sensitivity analysis using these alternative scenarios. Under some of them, energy bill savings are large enough to completely offset the additional upfront cost, resulting in a little or no net cost increases. So overall, our preliminary analysis using a conservative assumptions. Since our work is still in progress, we will continue to seek the public feedbacks on our method, data sources, and assumptions, including the energy scenario shown here. Now, I will pass it to Maggie to host the next section.
Thanks, G. And thanks to everyone who's here for your attention over the last hour. A quick recap. In response to public feedback and our staff analysis, CARB staff have revised our regulatory proposal. to an emissive equipment limit that decreases gradually over time. The intent is that this design will be clear and actionable for manufacturers, yet retain sufficient flexibility for end users. Additional compliance flexibility is added through the credit system, which is oriented towards addressing end user challenges and lowering costs. So now we will turn it over to all of you. Staff look forward to hearing your feedback, and we are especially interested to hear any thoughts you have in response to the following questions. First, does a gradually decreasing emissive sales limit adequately address regulated entity and end user challenges? If not, what alternative approach do you suggest? Should CARB differentiate emissive sale limit and or credits based on equipment size and capacity? And if so, how? Do you have any feedback on the proposed reporting requirements we shared today? What do you like and what are your concerns about the proposed credit system? And how could credit values, credit limits, and banking limits be designed to support well-functioning credit system for this regulation? Focusing on the second half of our presentation, we're particularly interested in any feedback that you have on the CARB staff implementation planning and interagency coordination. Any overall comments on our staff analysis methods or the results that we presented today? Specifically, any comments on the technology types, status, current deployment of zero-emission options? With regard to the equity analysis, are there any other equity dimensions you'd like to see CARB staff analyze and report on? And then specifically for the cost analysis, which energy rate forecasts do you recommend CARB use to model the impact of future energy prices? So now is the time for public comment. For anyone who is online and is interested in providing a verbal public comment, please use the raised hand feature in the Zoom toolbar. And as we're waiting for people to raise their hands for verbal comments, I'm going to pause and send it to Emma to see if there are any questions or comments in the Q&A feature that we can run through.
Great. Yes, thank you, Maggie. So thanks so much to folks who have been sending us comments in the Q&A. I'll go ahead and recap some of the answered questions. And if folks can't see the Q&A, you should have a button in the lower bar of your Zoom window where you can open up and see the written answers to questions. So we addressed a few logistical questions. We had a question from Tom Cabot about hydrogen fueled devices and how the user would show that they are supplying an amount of renewably produced hydrogen each year equal to their consumption. And my colleague Sam responded that we are defining zero emission as zero greenhouse gas emissions emitted during the operation of space and water heaters at the building site, due to the importance of on-site emissions and being a significant source of greenhouse gas emissions from commercial and residential buildings. So we're focused on those on-site emissions in this regulation. There are some links to reports that we've mentioned during the presentation. We shared information on how we are collecting sales limit data, but if folks have further questions, please go ahead and raise your hands. Amy Dow from Bay Area Air District asked, has the state forecasted gas rates with decreased gas usage from the proposed rules? How do these bill impacts compare to avoided upfront costs for households that remain on emissive appliances in later years? My colleague Chi wrote, yes, we use the latest gas price forecast from the CEC's 2025 IPER. Depending on gas price forecasting scenarios, the outcome for bill impacts may be different. We'll cover that topic in the later slides. So hopefully Chi's presentation helped clarify further. Okay, then we have a question from Alice Sung regarding innovative. Does battery storage include thermal storage? And for that, I will invite my colleague Awe to answer this one live.
Yep. Alice, thanks so much for asking this question. We can definitely look into and consider thermal storage and its applications before considering adding it to the innovative technologies list. Thanks.
We had a comment from Tom Cabot around would CARB consider having a high but declining scale of extra credit instead of fixed expiry of credits at 2035. For this and other comments of the would CARB consider nature, yes, we are really eager to hear your feedback on the proposal and concepts presented today. Comments of any and all varieties are much appreciated from this group to help us form our more refined regulatory proposal. And then similarly for Blake's comment here around options to reduce the sales allowance, remove the credit system, or fail to meet our climate goals, just really acknowledge and appreciate Blake's highlighting the urgency of addressing climate change and mitigating greenhouse gas emissions wherever possible. We know that the ambition of this target presented today is drawn back from the 100% zero emission sales concepts we presented in previous iterations of this regulatory concept in response to the feedback that we received around feasibility concerns and considerations. So we are really eager to hear from folks about the appropriateness of the targets that we have set. And as Maggie shared in one of our core questions, are certainly open to alternative ideas about how we can meet the state's greenhouse gas reduction goals. And folks can see our links to the slides and other materials in the answered question list. We've got a couple open questions that came in through typing, but I see that there's a few raised hands for comments. So why don't we take those comments and then we'll get back to some of the written questions that were submitted.
Sounds great. Thank you, Emma. So we have 4 hands up currently. I will call your name. And then once your name is called, if you could please unmute yourself by clicking the red button and then introduce yourself. If you are calling in on the telephone, you can use *9 to raise or lower your hand and dial *6 to mute and unmute yourself. And if you have any technical difficulties, you can add them to the Q&A feature and we can address them there, or email us, of course, at buildingdecarb@arb.ca.gov. We have people monitoring that. Krista Wanner has had their hand up throughout, so I will allow Krista to go first if they still have a question, and then the order will be Angela Evans, Craig Miso, and Tony Sirna, and then we will continue down the list. So Krista, go ahead.
Krista Warner with Western Propane Gas Association. I'd like to thank CARB staff for considering more flexible approaches in this rulemaking and for taking time to meet with WPGA to discuss our concerns. The staff proposal allows Californians to continue reaping the affordable and reliable air quality benefits of high-efficiency propane space and water heaters. At first glance, we prefer alternative regulatory concept 1 from today's presentation, as it is less stringent and more affordable for all parties. We also appreciate the incorporation of our members' feedback from the listening sessions, both virtual and in person, for incorporating feedback highlighting issues of housing affordability, high installation energy cost, electric reliability in rural regions, and allowing dual fuel systems. For next steps, I'd like to note the importance of accurate modeling and look forward to providing further comment in our letter. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Krista. Appreciate your feedback. I forgot to mention up front, we are also, this wasn't an issue, but we're also limiting comments to 3 minutes. And there is a small timer at the top of the Zoom window that, so you can watch to make sure that you stay in time, and there will be a little beeping sound at the end to indicate your time is done. So I will keep moving down the list. Angela Evans, go ahead.
Thank you. This is Angela Evans, a director at Menlo Spark. I'm one of your public experts in this context. We also co-led one of the listening sessions you held in 2024, and I very much enjoyed meeting many of the CARB staff who's online today then. That said, I strongly oppose the move from 100% zero emission standards to the emission sales targets proposals you just put forward. Apologies for background noise here. This is not just a less aggressive change as you've described it. This strikes me as a major gutting and significant slashing of commitments and grave departure from California's leadership in this space. And given the vital importance of the state of California in the global need to address climate pollution, this weakening puts all of us at ever-increasing climate and public health risk. I encourage you to watch the recording for yesterday's Bay Area Air District Stationary Source Committee, in which board members unanimously gave Air District staff guidance that reflects an interest in moving forward with Rules 9.6 and 9.4 as planned with the proposed flexibility measures, or exemptions as you call them. One is to provide an exception for folks based on income level, such as 80% AMI or other criteria. Others are for technical and capacity challenges. The proposal on the table is to begin with a sort of a self-attest mechanism that makes it very user-friendly to obtain flexibility and straightforward. Over time, this process to obtain exceptions can be refined and tightened. One of the first concerns that you mentioned at the beginning of this webinar and throughout is about the need for expensive panel upgrades. This is no longer a concern. This was a big point of discussion yesterday, but you still can provide exceptions for edge cases. Specifically, the percentages provided on your slide 39 for expected moderate and extensive electrical upgrades feels substantially overinflated at my first glance. Some of the feedback you heard in the listening sessions may not have been informed about the notion of power efficient design and how this can easily eliminate the need for expensive panel upgrades. In fact, on Monday, Menlo Spark gave a tour of a 1960s era multifamily building in the East Bay, where we fully electrified all 5 units on a main 200 amp panel. That's 200 amps across 5 units, soon to be 6, without a need to upgrade. We did this work in partnership with the Association for Energy Affordability and BayREN. We showed how you can efficiently and effectively electrify older building stock without panel upgrades on very small main panels and subpanels. And yes, we need tenant protections too. Menlo Spark is working on it in collaboration with our city. The cities of Berkeley, San Francisco, LA, and Oakland already provide some strong examples, and we can work on this in parallel. I urge you to undo this grave departure and get us back to the leadership we expect. Please get back to the 100% with well-formed flexibilities for vulnerable communities. Thank you.
Thanks so much for your comments, Angela. We really appreciate that. I'm going to move on to Craig Miso, and after that it'll be Tony Cerna, Blake Hirschcraft, and Sam Fishman. So Craig Miso, go ahead.
Hi there. Craig Misso. I'm representing myself as a individual who owns a condominium in a multi-family complex, and I'm also very happy to see the opportunity here for some relaxing of these requirements. I'd like to bring out just a couple of considerations or questions for you on the material. The first question you had indicated here about the down the road as products become less available due to your specified reduction in availability. I do have a concern. Is there going to be a way to ensure that supply and demand doesn't overtake the credits that are being offered and results in the consumer ending up not able to get a replacement unit? So something to consider in that respect. With respect to question 11, I just wanted to make sure that you're considering the impact of reducing natural gas supply need and usage, consumption, etc. here in California, how that will affect overall national pricing for natural gas and could actually reduce incentives for any other states to move in the same direction. And then California is more or less moving in a direction where no one else is. And my third comment is, with respect to multifamily units on slides 39, 40, and 41, I'd encourage you to relook at those assumptions on the moderate and the extensive retrofitting costs. When considering panel sizes, the conductors to the panel sizes, the conduits that fill limits require you to follow, and then the transformer and the switchgear, all of which in some cases you're doubling capacity, or you're asking to try to make assumptions relative to what kind of new panel capacity technologies are going to work with. All of those things, it seemed to me for multifamily complexes, it is a much greater cost, mainly because you cannot consider the water heater separate from the space heater when considering retrofitting needs on multifamily complexes. You have to address them as one. Throughout your entire presentation, you're showing them as two separate considerations. They cannot be when considering multifamily locations and such. So I ask you to reevaluate that amount of impact. I think it's much higher than you're showing. And in condominium complexes where we're going to see major assessments to go in and actually make major changes throughout. And in addition to this, there's just a growing need for electricity. And where's the capacity? Nothing was really brought up in today's consideration of data centers and other aspects of how much we are just gobbling up electrical needs. So I thank you for your time on this and ask for your consideration of those items.
Thank you so much, Craig. That was great, and you've brought up a lot of great points for us to consider moving forward. I'm gonna stick with the list. We'll go to Tony, Blake, and Sam. Then we'll switch back to written comments, and then come back to the folks who have their hands up. So Tony, go ahead.
Thank you. This is Tony Cerna from Evergreen Action, and I appreciate the opportunity to comment as part of this process and for all of CARB's work to protect our air in California. While I totally agree with the need to address the challenges some households face during building decarbonization, I would describe this as a very disappointing proposal. It still allows way too much emissive equipment in 2045 and does not do enough to protect our air or reduce our greenhouse gases. This does not address the end user challenges of asthma, heart disease, the impacts of climate change. The greenhouse gas emissions reductions of less than 40% by 2045 do not align with California's goal of 85% emissions reductions in that year and net zero greenhouse gases. This does not seem to address pollution in disadvantaged communities or do enough to bring them along in this transition. The policy seems to do nothing to direct the sales of emissive equipment to the households that actually need them based on building characteristics or economic challenges. This proposal would leave too many people still using gas equipment, even as our gas systems shed customers and reduce throughput that will result in distribution costs skyrocketing for those remaining on the gas system. This type of policy does not give a clear signal to customers, manufacturers, or utilities that we must decarbonize all our buildings to meet our air quality and climate targets. A 100% zero emissions rule with common sense exemptions is possible. The Bay Area is currently solving these issues around building challenges in its regulation, and CARB should align with the Bay Area's rules rather than using such a ramping sales target. On the details of the proposal, I have serious concerns about offering multiple credits for some units. Given the sales limits combined with these credit multipliers means more emissive units and higher emissions. If you're going to provide these credit multipliers, you must have more stringent sales targets. I have questions around why, if there's only 14% of residential spaces that require extensive electrical upgrades for non-emissive equipment, why are you suggesting sales of 25 to 50% emissive equipment in 2045? For space heating, you assume very little extensive retrofits, and why do you continue to allow 25% of sales to be emissive? You say that 7 to 33% of residential units will need moderate or extensive retrofits, but this would allow 50% of sales in 2045. I don't understand why. And you ask about cost analysis, and you should definitely use an energy rate forecast that aligns with California's climate emission reduction goals. What will the energy rates be as we decarbonize, as we move off of the gas system, as fewer customers are present there? And further, I want to align with the comment in the text about that this would be based on equipment size or emissions expectations from that equipment and not a 1 credit per unit sales target. Thank you for this opportunity to comment, and I look forward to a stronger proposal in the future.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate your comments. I will open it up to Blake. Go ahead, Blake.
Hi, thanks CARB staff for all the hard work on this. It's a very challenging policy to implement. I really appreciate it. My name is Blake Hershaft. I'm Senior Building Electrification Engineer for Peninsula Clean Energy. So first I'll comment on Peninsula Clean Energy and then a personal comment. We'll have further comments in writing. So for now, just a recommendation on the credit side, as a programs specialist. Would appreciate that if any heat pumps or zero emissions technology are installed via a program or a rebate program, that doesn't result in a credit to allow for a gas burning appliance to be purchased on the other side. That'll kind of neutralize our emissions reduction strategies. So something in there. Um, I would like, as asked in the comments, if on the chart on page 34, CARB could also include a line for meeting our carbon emissions reductions targets. That would help understand whether this is falling short or meeting that goal. And I think we do have some statewide goals, 85% reduction by 2040 we can include there. And then other comments later. Again, thank you so much. On a personal side, so not representing Peninsula Clean Energy. I live in climate zone 16, so in the Tahoe area. I live in a house that's heated by electric resistance baseboard heaters and has been since 1968. It would be preferable to have a heat pump in there, but these are cheap to replace, inexpensive to replace. I will say that while my electricity bills in the winter are as often as we talk about wildfire insurance or health insurance and other costs that are skyrocketing at a much higher rate. So those are the bigger issues as far as monthly costs in this region rather than electricity costs of heating a bedroom. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Blake, and thank you for that context. That's really helpful to hear. I will open it up for Sam Fishman, and then we'll move to written comments, and then we will come back and take the rest of the hands. Go ahead, Sam.
Hello, CARB staff. Thanks so much for opportunity to comment. We really appreciate the difficulty of getting this right, of working on these rules over the last however many years. However, we are, and sorry, but to introduce myself, Sam Fishman at Spur here. We are a bit disappointed by this new proposal. A bit is maybe an understatement. This is quite a rollback from what we were expecting. While we would prefer a zero emission approach, we understand that this may not be the direction that CARB takes. But if CARB does take a sales target approach for manufacturers and includes a credit system, we really would expect a much more ambitious set of sales targets that aligns with state climate goals, that aligns with regional goals and city climate action plans. Under this plan, we will simply not reach any of those goals and will actually fall quite short. And I think with the credit system in place, we really have to think about how to get to 0% sales targets by 2040. That would be my recommendation. I'm also a little bit baffled by the kind of significantly less ambitious sales targets for water heaters, given the lower cost of that equipment and the significant innovation in that space around 120 volt equipment and new form factors that are expected in the coming years. I want to remind CARB staff that this is a market transformation policy. We should not be treating the present day conditions as permanent and fixed. This policy on its own will begin to shift the market dramatically. The state of California, 40 million strong, is a major mover of has significant influence over what manufacturers produce, what training contractors get to install what equipment, and how our supply chains develop to enable these kind of policies. So we really were hoping for something a little bit more ambitious. I also do want to raise up the point about electrical infrastructure. As Angela Evans noted, we've seen enormous progress in the ability for both single-family and multifamily building owners to fully electrify on existing electrical infrastructure. This is in part because of the advent of more power efficient equipment, like 120 volt equipment. It is also due to the increasing use of things like meter socket adapters, circuit pausers, and other load management or energy management systems. And we think that this is, this really undercuts the case that we have to roll back regulation at this scale to meet this kind of this issue. So we look forward to seeing hopefully more ambitious proposals in the future. And thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Sam. Really appreciate your comments. I will pass it over to Emma to walk through and highlight a few more of the questions that have come in, questions and comments that have come in through the Q&A feature.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Maggie. And thanks to all the commenters so far. Much appreciated. So going to some of the written questions we received during the presentation, we have a question from Bo White. Bo asked, if covered water heaters go up to 2 million BTU per hour, then the South Coast Air Quality Management District 1146.2 would also impact the water heat baseline, not just the pool heat baseline. To answer this question, I'm going to hand things to my colleague, Sam.
Yeah, thank you for the comment, Bo. Yeah, so just did want to clarify that while slide 13 was highlighting the impacts of the South Coast Rule 1146.2 for pool heating, we are indeed accounting for the impacts of other technologies that are in that rule in our baseline. So we are accounting for the compliance states for tankless water heaters, boilers, and large storage water heaters in our baseline as well. So yes, thank you for that comment.
Thanks, Sam. Next question here is from Kyle Bergeron. Kyle asked, would the rule differentiate between residential and commercial products, or would all product classes be grouped together? And I'll hand things over to Dana to answer this.
Thanks for your question, Kyle. I would say that our revised proposal considers requiring equipment with a rated heat input capacity greater than or up to 2 million BTUs per hour to comply with the emissive sales limits. We are considering having emissive limits across all capacities, but we're definitely open to hearing feedback on our proposal.
Thanks. Dana will also take this next question from Hao Jiang. Will the regulation, once adopted, apply to residential buildings?
Yeah, thanks for this question as well. Yes, as proposed, our emissive sales limits would apply to space and water heaters that are installed in residential buildings.
And one more for you, Dana, from Tony Cerna. Do the business as usual numbers factor in these proposed credit multipliers on slide 18 and 19?
That's a good question. No, the emissive baseline sales for space, water, and pool heating are really just the expected emissive sales in the absence of any kind of revised regulatory proposal. But we definitely appreciate any comments on those emissive baseline sales as well.
Thanks, Dana. And then I'll take this question from Eli Jacobson. Eli asked, why was there so much more in-person public engagement in Northern California? There's 24 million people living in SoCal, and there was one in-person public engagement opportunity in San Diego. So thanks, Eli. Yeah, appreciate this comment. Our in-person engagement was really driven by the public experts who co-hosted listening sessions. All of our in-person events were co-developed and designed with those who applied to be funded public experts to co-host listening sessions in their communities as part of our public engagement work in 2024. Our partner in Southern California recommended that we do a virtual listening session for the Orange County, Santa Ana area, and also helped us host a listening session that took place in San Diego. That being said, we just recognized your point about California being a large state with a vast population and the importance of reaching those folks. So we welcome any further comments, suggestions, recommendations about pertinent engagement opportunities that CARB staff should follow as we continue this work. Also note that in addition to our in-person sessions, we follow that up with 3 regional virtual listening sessions. We do our best to reach those who would be affected by the regulations, and thank you for continuing to encourage us to do rigorous engagement work. So with that batch of questions now answered, I think I'll pass it back to Maggie to continue with our public comment queue, and then we will return back to some of these written questions after that.
Great. I think we lost one, but we have 3 hands up, so we'll take those 3 and then see where we're at. So we have Denise, John, and Bruce. I will pass it to Denise Kadara right now. Go ahead, Denise.
All right. Good afternoon. No, my comment is just representing vulnerable rural communities, and as we spoke about equity analysis and information that goes into how the manufacturers will provide some kind of assistance or subsidies in the process. And I'm looking at the equipment that will become a part of that electrification program. We have been a model of one of those projects, and some of the equipment has not been in the quality condition. There's been some faulty equipment, and then the installation. So as we move forward with regulations, consideration and how that implementation part of the programming happens, that it serves the quality to vulnerable communities as any other community that gets the installation, electrification, the space heating and so forth. I think it's important to make sure that that happens for all communities, that is equitable for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much for raising that, Denise. Really appreciate that. I will pass it to John McKenna. Go ahead.
Hi, all. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you, CARB staff. I've worked with a few of you in the past in public listening sessions, and I appreciate the complexity and the difficulty of this task, but we really owe it to our children and future generations to not pass this burden on to them. I'm speaking as an individual. I live in Menlo Park. I do have an 11-year-old daughter, and as far as her future is concerned, I don't think this proposal bodes well for her future. I'm disappointed in the sort of weakening of this rule compared to previous iterations. I myself spoke at the Bay Area Air District meeting yesterday, and I really highlighted how these policies are setting off an acceleration of an exciting market transformation. We're seeing more and more uptake of zero emissions equipment. National sales of heat pump water heaters in 2023 grew by 35%, and gas water heater sales dropped significantly. It's also notable that across the country, heat pumps outsold furnaces last year by 32%, the largest margin ever. So what these policies are doing are setting the market in motion. And I think what this proposal does is sends mixed signals to the market. We're seeing it with the transportation rules as well, with the uncertainty around the 2035 goal of zero emission vehicles. We're seeing the manufacturers pull back on their innovation in electric vehicles. And I fear that this sort of proposal will do the same thing for zero emission equipment. I also wanted to highlight the previous comments about power efficient design. We are seeing that panel upgrades are the exception and not the rule. I myself was able to fully electrify my home on a 100 amp panel with EV charging, and I've had that in place for about over a year. I did a recent study. I pulled down my data from PG&E to show my peak usage. In that 12-month period, my home never used more than 40 amps. of that 100 amp panel. Now, I do not charge my car at home yet, but even if I did, I've got 60 amps worth of capacity on that panel, and my charger is only 30 amps. So I just really want to stress to have CARB take a closer look at these new technologies. The 120 volt water heaters were mentioned earlier. So thank you so much. I am disappointed, but I know we can get this right.
Thank you, John. Appreciate your comments. Bruce, you are up next. And then we have Alex and Michael. If it's okay with you, Emma, we'll do those two, and then we'll go back to the written comments. So Bruce, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Bruce Hodge. I'm with Carbon Free Palo Alto, and I'm also one of the CARB experts, as mentioned previously by Angela. And I will make my comments pretty short. I totally agree with the comments that have been made so far by Angela, Tony, Sam, and now John. I'm totally struck by the timidity of this proposal. It lacks ambition. It's a major U-turn, and it has a start date that is 5 years from now, which is unbelievable. The technology is going to continue to evolve in this 5-year period. I think it's telling that one of your commenters from the gas industry seems to like your proposal. They like it. So that's a good sign that it's a pullback. I also question whether the use of sales targets actually drive adoption of clean technology. I think that's more of a theory. It's very unclear whether targets at the manufacturer level will actually impact decisions made by individual building owners. So it's a theoretical approach at best. I'm also struck by the use of a credit system, which seems to echo the allowances system established by a cap and trade. And it seems to inherit all the same attributes that have allowed the cap and trade system to be gamed by the fossil fuel industry. It seems like an overly complex approach that can be gamed. It doesn't have a very good history based on the cap and trade approach. Your proposal also seems to lack this recognition that the technology is changing very rapidly, and we can expect significant technology advances in the next 5 years. So I was also one of the commenters at the Bay Area Air District committee meeting yesterday. And I think that their approach is much more robust. It can be done in a way that will have, we believe, a major impact upon the adoption of clean energy devices. And so I urge you to really do another U-turn and go back to looking at what's going on at the Bay Area Air District, which I think basically is leading the pack in terms of these proposals. And I thank you for your efforts. I understand this is a difficult effort. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Bruce. Alex, I will pass it to you now. Go ahead, Alex Ayers.
Thank you. Alex Ayers with the Heating, Air Conditioning, Refrigeration Distributors International. We represent wholesale distributors of HVACR and water heating products not only in the state of California, but across the country. I have lots of concerns about this regulation or proposal. Everything from reporting requirements of what we consider to be confidential business information and trade secrets, all the way to essentially establishing a vicarious liability on a group of people who have no control over the actions of what is installed or chosen to be purchased by consumers in the state. It's also just seems to be an extremely complicated setup that I think is going to end up increasing costs for consumers without actually changing behavior. So looking forward to digging into this more and providing comment before the deadline, but just wanted to provide those comments while available.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate your comments as well. I also just want to do a quick plug. We've heard a lot of comments today, and I just want to remind everyone that the comment docket and the comment period to submit written comments will be open until January 14th. And there have been some examples or mentioning data or information. If you are able to submit a comment through the comment docket with that information or data, that would be extraordinarily helpful to us as staff. So just a quick plug for that. I will now turn it over to Michael Lewis. Michael, go ahead.
Thank you very much. As you said, my name is Mike Lewis. I'm with the Construction Industry Coalition on Air Quality, and I wanted to, I guess, a few random things having sat through this presentation. First of all, I think you are on the right track taking this approach. As someone who, lived intimately through the catastrophe that was the South Coast effort. I think this is a much more realistic approach to this matter and beginning this transition. But I would guess raise a few questions with you. I don't know if you've looked at the Consumer Reports analysis that they did on this type of equipment, and they looked at 10,000 installations over quite a few number of years and said this was the most unreliable equipment they'd ever evaluated. I think it would be worthwhile for you to take a look at that. The building codes take care of new construction on all of this material. So this rule is really focused at retrofitting. And it's one thing, if my water heater went out today, I could get a new water heater by tonight and be back in business for $2,500. But if I had to switch it out to a heat pump, I'd be looking at 2 or 3 times that cost and needing to get a permit. And I don't have to upgrade my panel because I did that when I upgraded my heating unit, my 50-year-old heating unit a few years ago. But it's a much longer exercise. So if you're going to switch this out, you have to plan it. You can't wait. If you have an emergency, you're going to need to take care of that quickly, and it's going to take you a couple of weeks to switch out and nobody's going to want to go without hot water for that period of time. I would also suggest that you look at the letter that was written by the U.S. Attorney to South Coast the night before they were adopting their or considering the 1121, because there is a federal statute that exempts, I believe, standard setting, and I don't know where the line is drawn between setting standards and a sales limit. But I think that letter was also instrumental in the board's decision to not proceed on the course that they were proceeding. And I suspect that once a new regional administrator is appointed, that the pool heating rule at South Coast and the rules at the Bay Area are going to come under scrutiny by the EPA as well. So if you want to avoid that, I would suggest you look at the letter that he sent and the code section in the federal law that he mentioned on exemptions. On the reporting stuff, I guess just looking at that, I would take some steps to make sure you're not double counting, because if you have a manufacturer reporting and they're selling to distributors and the distributors are reporting, the distributors are selling to retailers or to plumbers that are buying in huge quantities and they're reporting as well, you're going to be double and triple counting and not getting the kind of accurate information that you're looking for. And then I guess on the energy prices, it would seem to me, I don't, and I'm not familiar with what the Energy Commission does, but the PUC is the one that sets the rates, and they've already got their projected rates out for quite a number of years. They've approved rate increases going out five years and beyond. So I would think I would double check what the PUC's done in terms of rates versus what the Energy Commission's projecting, because I'm not sure that they completely align. And then I meant,
Michael, I'm sorry to cut you off. We do have a time limit, and I've let you go over a bit. I'm gonna, if it's okay with you, I'm gonna turn it back over to Emma to make sure that everybody gets heard, and then if you want to raise your hand again, we can come back to you.
okay,
I just want to keep the rules fair for everyone.
that's fine.
Thank you. Thanks. Emma, I will hand it back to you to go over some of the comments and questions that have been submitted through the Q&A feature.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Maggie. So we have a question from Blake Kershaft on slide 34. Can CARB provide the emission reduction of the policy as compared to the sector emission reductions required to meet AB 1279, 85% reduction versus 1990 levels by 2045? For this question, I'll pass things to Sam.
Yeah, thank you, Blake, and thank you for providing additional context verbally a little bit earlier. Yeah, I think I just add that our emission reduction estimates for our updated regulatory concept are about 39 million metric tons, carbon dioxide equivalents between 2030 and 2045. Additionally, we have done some modeling within the scoping plan that looks at the different sectors and their contribution to AB 1279. So I'd encourage you to read through the scoping plan. We can send you the link in the chat, and then please follow up with us with any questions regarding that. So thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Next question here from Omar Gutierrez Tapia. Do the electrical capacity retrofit levels consider other fuel substitution end uses such as cooktops and dryers? And I'll pass things to Allison Hyatt.
Yeah, thanks for this question, Omar. So for the residential analysis, the panel capacity thresholds could accommodate all end uses, but they may need panel optimization if between 100 and 200 amps. For the non-residential analysis, we only considered electrical impacts from space and water heating at this time.
Thanks, Allison. This next one is for you as well from Paul Raftery. Paul wrote, from the content so far, it seems credits are accrued by unit count. For example, one gas boiler is one debit, one heat pump is one credit, with additional multipliers for novel technologies. If this is correct, consider weighting credits and debits by equipment output capacity instead of unit count. Otherwise, participants can game the system by generally selling several small heat pumps to offset large gas boilers across their portfolio. Even within a project, increasing unit count, for example, installing 3 smaller instead of 2 larger heat pumps, would get more credit somewhat artificially. Or at a large central plant retrofit, one could install 2 small heat pumps alongside a large gas boiler, and that would have the exact same credit impact, 1 net credit, as a project that installed just 1 large heat pump and no gas boiler. So thank you, Paul, for that comment, and Allison, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, thank you for this suggestion. We are considering credits to support installation of zero emission equipment in large buildings, and we will continue to evaluate this recommendation. As Maggie has said earlier, we welcome any additional comments on our comment docket, and those are due January 14th.
Great. We have a question from Farhad Farhamand. What may be repercussions for manufacturers who remain in deficit of sales targets? And I'll pass this one to Dana.
Thanks, Farhad, for this question. As proposed currently, manufacturers who remain in a deficit of the emissive sales limit would be subject to enforcement penalties.
Thank you, Dana. Our next question is from Melody Black. Did you discuss benefits associated with each of the alternative options? And I'll pass this one to Sam.
Thank you. Yes, so I refer back to slides 34 and 35. We do include a discussion on the emission benefits for both the alternatives and proposal. Also, slide 46 will show the associated cost benefits. In general, alternative 1 has lower costs, but lower emission and health benefits compared to our proposal, while alternative 2 has both higher costs, but higher emission reductions and health benefits associated with it.
Thanks, Sam. Last for this round is from Jim Burrows. How does your regulatory scheme fit with the Bay Area Air District's regulatory scheme, assuming that both are rolled out as currently proposed? And I'll pass this to Dana.
Thanks, Jim. Right now, our revised regulatory proposal we think would be complementary to the Bay Area's regulatory scheme, as the Bay Area rules require zero NOx space and water heaters, and their latest proposed amendments to Rule 9.6 provide some limited exemptions for NOx emitting smaller water heaters under 35,000 BTUs per hour to continue to be sold. It also allows applicants that meet certain qualifications and projects facing certain constraints to file exemptions. So as the Bay Area offers exemptions, we believe it's complementary to our proposal for the gradually decreasing emissive equipment sales limits to help us meet our greenhouse gas emission reduction goals.
Great. Thank you, Dana. I'll just note as a reminder, the Q&A feature is for questions that you have of CARB staff. If you have information that's more of a comment nature, we do encourage you to raise your hand and get in the queue to share that out loud. We may not address all questions that we receive in writing, but we do appreciate your written comments in the public docket. Thank you. And I'll pass it back to you, Maggie.
Great. We have one hand up, Tom Cabot. Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you. I'm Tom Cabot, an energy engineer, a retired gas and electric utility planner. I used to design programs and then supply side resources and make all these power content labels, greenhouse gas reports, all that stuff. So I have a kind of a well-rounded view of what's going on, and I'm very concerned with this kind of U-turn in the proposal. And I'm wondering how you even picture it working. And I want to propose a simpler alternative. Blake Heights Hershaft was pointing out the problem of when you set one of these caps, then it makes everyone else's efforts moot, because anything they do to reduce emissions allows somebody else to increase emissions. And so nobody can have an additive impact anymore. So I might suggest you explore thoroughly figuring out what is the greenhouse gas pollution cost, or the cost to get rid of CO2. You can use DAC costs if you want, but look at what is the cost per ton, and then figure out how to just transition that into a charge you charge at the time of sale of polluting devices. That dramatically simplifies the whole administration of everything. You simply have to collect the pollution fee when the device is sold at the big box store or the distributor. And then that gives you fees, collected revenues available to do some of the assistance programs needed to get these units installed where you're going to need things installed. I also was vastly disappointed with the answer to the question about the hydrogen. If you are only looking on site and not looking upstream, you're missing most of the emissions. What the natural gas we get in California has already leaked about anywhere from 3 to 9% of the methane by the time it gets to our sites. And each 3% leakage of that high GWP gas ends up equaling the combustion emissions of the rest of the gas. So our Permian gas, with its 9% leakage in the Permian Basin, is already at 3 times the combustion emissions. Ignoring it does not help us meet our goals. We need to include upstream emissions on hydrogen, which is 100% the way it's reformed from methane, or higher if you count the methane leakage, and also on the methane itself for our natural gas appliances. And then let us see the honest comparison of what our pollution costs are to society when we buy the equipment. Because I don't think we can meet our targets, our state's targets, with the continuation of sales of so much polluting equipment. So I'm urging you to improve the analysis by including upstream emissions, and you can do it on electricity too in our ever cleaner electric grid, make it fair, but include the upstream emissions, take a look at what's going on, and then look out for this substitutive type of thing that undermines all the other incentive programs once nothing's additive anymore. And then think of the simplicity of charging a fee to pollute and letting people decide, do they want to pay a fee and be a polluter, or do they want to buy the efficient equipment and join the transition? I also agree with the other parties who said we've pretty much debunked the myth that electrical panel constraints are a big deal. There are lots of ways to deal with them. In the panel optimization you mentioned, you only looked at controls, but some of the other methods are more efficient devices in other parts and in more insulation, smaller heat pumps, and let's make things more economic. Anyway, thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Tom. We really appreciate your comments about alternatives and our modeling. I will pass it back to Emma. We don't have any other hands up right now for comment. Actually, I'm going to take one more. Jed Holtzman just raised his hand, so we will take Jed's comment and then I will pass it over to you, Emma. Thanks. Go ahead, Jed.
Thanks very much. And thanks for the opportunity. Jed Holtzman with RMI. I did put a couple questions in the Q&A, but sort of towards the bottom, and just wanted to make sure that they were voiced because I do think they're important as you all think through sort of the effectiveness of the proposal as stated. The Bay Area and South Coast AQMDs, if you add up the population of those, it's about 63% of the state, almost 2/3 of the state population. And as an earlier speaker pointed out, while South Coast declined this summer to tighten their residential space and water heating rules to sort of a zero NOx approach in a similar way to the Bay Area, they are planning on bringing back some sort of alternative rule in 2026 to address those sources, which they are legally required to do. And then, as other speakers have noted, Rule 1146.2 for the larger sources and the tankless sources has already been adopted, as have sort of the full suite of rules in the Bay Area. And so with what is likely to be 2/3 of the population of the state for at least many equipment categories being sort of changed out to zero emission devices over time, I think it's really important for you all to think through the degree to which your sales limits will be additional. I know that in the chart that you presented with the dashed and solid lines, so for example, slides 12 and 13, that sort of compares business as usual to what you are proposing, but not seeing sort of increasing sales over time to the degree that I think we would expect for sort of a section of the state of such size going to zero NOx. And so just wanted to sort of highlight the need to ensure that what you are proposing is actually going to result in additional emissions reductions and not simply sort of be taken care of by air district rules in other jurisdictions. Second, I think there's a statement stated a couple times that I don't think has necessarily been laid out as clearly as it could. That is, quote, market-wide emission reduction goals rather than targeted exemptions do not leave communities facing barriers behind. I really hope that the agency can say more on that. It seems like if communities have higher retrofit needs, that a market-based approach would steer away from those projects towards sort of lower cost projects. And so it seems like you might just be counting on credit mechanisms to provide some fringe benefits to sort of communities facing barriers. Totally recognize that exemptions are not ideal and that we would like 100% funding to take care of everyone that we can. But I think relying on a couple credits is not necessarily strong enough to say that this will not leave communities facing barriers behind. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Jed. I'm going to pass it back to Emma to go through a few more questions that have come up in the Q&A.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much, Maggie. And thank you, Jed, for your comment. Just in response to the additionality piece, the presence of the air district, the Bay Area Air District rule is factored into our analysis, and the emission reductions we shared today are in addition to those that would be achieved by the air district's rules that is on the books. It, of course, does not include the South Coast rules that were considered but not adopted earlier this year. So I'll go to the question from Brian Pickett that we have in the queue here. Brian asks, I find myself questioning why you are being less aggressive with pool heaters than space heaters. This seems backwards to me. Could you please explain how and why you arrived at this arrangement? I'll pass this one to Sam.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you, Brian, for your comment. So we currently have less requirements for pool heating, mainly because the emission reduction potential for pool heating is much less than for space and water heating. But however, with that said, we do welcome further feedback in this area, and if you have further suggestions on what the pool heater requirements you'd like to see, we'd like to hear what that would be. So thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Sam. This next question is also for you. So David Winningham asks, how is CARB going to account for zero-emission products? Many residential and commercial systems are split systems. OD section of a heat pump, ID section that could be used for a heat pump or electric heater, electric furnaces. What about dual fuel products? Just curious on initial thoughts on how to account.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. So related to dual fuel equipment and systems, so those that combine zero emission and emissive technologies, we certainly see that as playing a crucial role towards building decarbonization. But because our concept is no longer 100% zero emission sales, we're still considering how to treat those systems in the regulation. And we appreciate your ideas related to that. Also regarding reporting for split system technologies and units that are not sold as a package system, we're still identifying the best way to do that reporting, and we're open to your suggestions in that area as well.
Thanks, Sam. I'll also pass this next one to you from Edison Shen. Regarding the emissive sales limits on slide 11, are the emissive sales limits for 3 product categories calculated separately or in aggregate?
Yeah, Edison, so the emissive sales limits in that slide, they are calculated in aggregate for the 3 separate end uses. But again, we do welcome further feedback and comment in that area.
Great. This next one I'll pass to Dana from ESAL Flores. Do the regulations include non-residential and commercial as well?
Thanks, Emma. Thanks, Uso. Yeah, thanks for this question. As proposed, the emissive sales limits would apply to space and water heaters up to 2 million BTUs per hour that would be installed in non-residential buildings.
Great. This next one I'll also pass to you, Dana, from Andrew Silva, asking about a timeline for adoption, as in when do you expect this to go to the CARB board?
That's a good question. At this point, we're waiting for public feedback, and we'll share more documents publicly in early 2026. We do have some of those identified on the next step slide in our presentation.
Thanks, Dana. Okay, so with that, I'll pass it back to Maggie to facilitate further public comments.
Thanks, Emma. We have one hand up from Tony Cerna, who we've already heard from. So even though we're ping-ponging it a little bit, if there are still unanswered questions in the Q&A from folks we haven't heard from, I suggest we do that first, just to make sure that everybody gets heard.
I think we can go ahead and take Tony's comment and then return to questions. I think the team is formulating some responses.
Tony, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, thank you very much for more time. Appreciate the opportunity. Uh, Thank you for sharing the scoping plan. I'm looking at the scoping plan from 2022 and that you shared, and it shows gas uh, heating appliance sales going to zero in 2035. And so I'm trying to reconcile this proposal with the scoping plan. And as much as I can tell, I would say like this proposal does not align with the scoping plan's goals for emissions reductions in the building sector. And I'm just wondering if you can comment on that or whether I'm reading that incorrectly.
Thanks, Tony. I don't, does anybody from our team want to comment specifically on the goals from the scoping plan?
I can take a stab, Maggie.
Thanks, Vimla.
Thanks, Tony, for going through the scoping plan. I just want to mention that scoping plan is put together as a plan in terms of what the targets are, or what do we need in terms of meeting the goals. And it's a plan, right? And then when we start developing a regulation, we go through our technical analysis, all the technical feasibility, cost impacts, and public feedback. So the what's in the plan evolves as we actually start developing the regs. So in terms of the number matching, it's not going to be matching exactly. It's the plan is an overall plan in terms of what's needed, but as you can imagine, when the actual reg hits the road, we have to factor in a lot of things. So that's what's the gap is going to be. It's never going to be the same, and obviously we take it seriously that we need to meet the goals, but then we also have to, like I said, factor all these, incorporate all these factors in there. So I'll stop there, but hopefully you get the intent here.
Thanks, Pamela. We do not have any other hands up from participants right now.
Great. We can go back to a couple questions that were put in the queue. We had a comment from Mike Kopolnek earlier this morning, noting that electric resistant space and water heaters have faster heating rates compared to heat pumps, and slow heating is a feature of heat pumps. So just reading that aloud for folks. We have a question from James Phillips. Is the staff report available, or is the update in the presentation all the information we have to review? At this time, the workshop and the presentation is the information we are requesting public comment on in advance of January 14th. Our team is working on staff reports that, as Dana mentioned, will be shared in early 2026. Nate Dewart asks, is there a list of sources you've used for your analysis? I'm particularly wanting to ensure that the publicly available Tech Clean California dataset has been continued to be leveraged to the greatest extent possible on an ongoing basis with data on over 60,000 heat pumps. And for this, I'll pass things to my colleague, Chi.
Thanks, Nate. Thanks for your question. So we use the cost data majorly from the E-Trim and the EIA for both conventional and the zero emission equipment. And we cross-checked our estimate using the information from Tech Clean California and other utility incentive programs. I think the biggest sources of the uncertainty is the cost of the building retrofits, which can vary wildly home by home. So we are continuing to refine our estimate as new data, such as additional data points from Tech Clean California programs, become available. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Chi. We have a question from Tom Cabot. Do you propose selling credits to manufacturers or giving them away? How are credits allocated? And I'll pass this one to Dana.
Thanks, Tom, for raising that question. At this point, the credits would be allocated based on what manufacturers report. So you can see the equation that we included in one of the slides, and now I have to go back and look which slide that was to demonstrate whether or not that they are meeting or below the limit. And if they exceed the limit, then basically that would count as a credit deficit. If they are below the limit, then they could earn credits for those. As I mentioned, if they're also, producing and delivering for sale or selling zero emission equipment with innovative technology or any of the other credit categories, that would be provided in their annual report. It would be documented and they would be allocated credits based on what they're submitting in those annual reports.
Great. Thanks, Dana.
Yeah.
I will read a comment that Blake Hershaft submitted on related to pool heaters, that the greenhouse gas emission savings of a single pool heated by gas, for example, in the city of Brisbane, the pool heater represents 75% of the city's municipal emissions. Electrifying the pool is equivalent to electrifying over 100 homes. And for Menlo Park, heating a single aquatic center's pools represent more emissions than the city's entire fleet of vehicles. So thank you so much, Blake, for this comment. Just wanted to read that aloud. Great, we can hold for raised hands for any additional comments that folks would like to share.
While we're waiting, Emma, I'm just going to reiterate, I think what we have said before is that we really, really appreciate all the comments and all the input we have received during the workshop, but we also will really appreciate if you can submit comments in writing by the deadline, so because those are really helpful and further inform as we continue to work on this regulation. So any data or any supporting resources that you can point us to or provide in your written comments would be really appreciated.
Going to give it a couple, maybe a minute or two, just in case anyone has any other thoughts they want to share. I don't want to rush us through and then have someone miss their chance.
And there was a question that we just received about the comment page not working. We'll make sure it's working in the next few minutes. Thank you for letting us know.
Okay, we have a hand up from Nate Duart. Go ahead.
Hi there, thank you. I just put Nate Dewar from Energy Solutions. I just put the question in the chat, but just to expedite, can you speak to the process for any updates to the rules and sales targets throughout the process, either before 2030 and after, based on the data that's reported and the you receive, the data you receive, and any market changes, as the market develops?
Sure. Thank you for that. Thank you for that question. I think I'd like to hand it off if somebody wants to take this, but at a first pass, I'll say that any major changes to the rule or regulation once it's adopted, if it's adopted, would require an amendment, so an amendment process. But does anybody else want to speak to that question?
No, I think you covered it, Maggie. Sorry, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, no, I was going to agree with that. I mean, basically, this is still a proposal, and nothing has been officially released for 45-day comment. So we're still open to hearing comments at this point on, what we should be including in some of these emissive sales limits, and the overall structure of the proposal. So definitely appreciate your feedback. Now is the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll add, Nate, to the extent your question is related to how we are arriving at our proposed emissive sales limits, as we discussed, they're informed by our analysis of potential retrofit needs and cost implications to provide the encouragement to manufacturers and address edge cases, which can be quite substantial when you consider the aggregate of potential retrofit and equipment costs and, income inequality and resource inequality in the state. That being said, we're hearing a lot today, the disappointment around the drawback of ambition, a sense of the appropriateness of the Bay Area Air District's approach. So now is really the time for you to submit data to our team to substantiate a different way that we can set these emission limits so that it can be incorporated in the written regulatory proposal that will be considered next year. So really appreciate all the feedback today. We're having this workshop at this point so that we can check in with a broader stakeholder community around the appropriateness of the approach that we are taking. So I see that Isao has a raised hand. Shall we go back to comments then?
Sure, Isao, go ahead.
Hi, all. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for all your hard work on this. So I just wanted to clarify, the emissive sales limits are for units that are below 2 million BTUs, right? For non-residential. Okay, sounds good.
Correct.
And so how would this work in, say, like a mixed use building, right? Like sometimes you have like businesses at the bottom. I don't know, is there like a specification for this, or would it just be the same? So,
Yeah, it applies to the equipment type rather than the building type or the use case. So it would apply to
gotcha.
all equipment under 2 million BTUs versus like in residential settings versus commercial settings. It's the setting is not part of the regulation. Just the equipment type is being regulated.
Great. Sounds good. Thanks for the clarification. That's all from me.
Yeah, thank you. I'll give a little more time in case there are any other outstanding questions or burning comments for folks that they'd like to share. Emma, is there anything else in the Q&A that we want to go over?
We have a question from Yassi Kavizadeh here. What was the reason for not providing exemptions for edge case compliance? And I think that the intention with setting emissive limits was that implicitly they account for those edge cases because emissive equipment is still available for sale into contexts that are not suitable at this time to install zero emission equipment. However, we are certainly open for feedback on this and welcome your written comments or further verbal comments today. Let's see, there was another question from Blake Hershaft here as well. When will this be released for 45-day comment? Will changes be made before that release? So this will be released for 45-day comment next year. This workshop is a first draft of the ideas that staff are developing in our report. That report is still under development, and so you will see more detail on the final 45-day proposal at the time it's released.
And I would like to verbally say that the public docket is actually working. So if you're having issues, please let us know. But it should be working for everybody.
Thanks, Melanie. I think Blake's question was a nice segue to our final slides on next steps. Do we want to keep moving? Great. Okay, well, a huge thank you for everyone who has participated in today's workshop and attending the workshop and engaging with this rulemaking process. It's been extremely informative for us, the staff, and we hope informative for you as well. Some next steps for those of you who are still digesting everything about today, the written public comment, as we've mentioned, can be submitted using the link here and the link that's in the chat. These are due by January 14th, and we really encourage everyone who has thoughts to share them in that venue. The next steps for us as staff, we plan to release both the draft regulatory language and the economic analysis in the first quarter of 2026. And then to stay up to date on all things building decarb related at CARB, including the draft language release and the economic analysis release, we hope that you'll subscribe to our listserv if you haven't already. Our website also has additional background information for those who want to learn more. And of course, our email is buildingdecarb@arb.ca.gov. If you have any questions, we would love to hear from you using that email address. So thank you so much for all of your time today. I think we're going to close, and I will do so by wishing everyone a great holiday season. Thank you so much.